Do you agree? Oh, that is a really lukewarm agreement. Well, maybe you're answering it from the place of you're in a spiritual teaching, you're in a spiritual practice, and you feel like your whole focus is on waking up. Yes? Yes. And the trick is staying awake, right? That's the trick. So we have been exploring together throughout this month some of the concepts in Neale Donald Walsh's book on change. And we're going to continue with that today, and we're going to marry some of his ideas on change, some of the tools he gives, with the fact that today is Palm Sunday. And we're going to pull a little bit from Jesus' life and Jesus' experience of what we call Palm Sunday today, and how some of the elements of that Palm Sunday experience can help us as well with this idea of change, of waking up, of staying awake, of implementing change and knowing how to respond to change when it happens. The title of my talk is Making the Change with Ease and Grace. Making the change with ease and grace. Those last words I've come to realize I use a lot. I use the phrase, ease and grace a lot. And I was thinking about why. Why do I use that phrase so often? And it's because I really want to experience my life, all aspects of it, my work life, my personal life, with greater ease and grace. Are any of the rest of you interested in that? Ease and grace. Then turn to somebody next to you and say, ease and grace. All right, now touch your heart and take it inside with ease and grace. I'm looking out, I know some of you are in the process of moving your home from 18, 20 years plus, no, 40 years plus, with ease and grace. With ease and grace. Some changes are expected and some come completely unexpected, come as surprises. Some changes are pleasant. Some changes feel devastating. Some changes are orchestrated by us, and others seem to come just completely out of the blue. But what we can be certain of is within every change, whether it is a positive change, a change that we really wanted or not, whether it is a change that we orchestrated or not, that every change has within it the potential to grow us. The potential to grow us. And I say the word potential deliberately because we can go through change without growing. Our goal in our spiritual practice and in our spiritual path is to not merely go through change, but to eke out every single solitary blessing in a change that we might grow through it as a result of it. So we're going to take a look first at one of the teachings, one of the tools in Walsh's book. And it is this idea. He says that we need to change our idea about why change occurred in the first place. We need to change our idea about why change has occurred in the first place. He says this change didn't occur because we live in a scary world that's out to get us. It didn't occur because we've been bad and we're being punished. It didn't occur because we're in the wrong place at the wrong time. It didn't occur for any of those reasons. It occurred, now take a deep breath, because you may not like what he says as the answer. Take a deep breath. He said, it has occurred because we wanted it to. Yeah, I hear somebody say, what? I don't think so. I didn't want this to happen. How many of you can look at a change in your life and agree with that statement? I didn't want this to happen. Raise your hand, right? So the point he makes, though, is yes, there are those changes that happen that every ounce of our being says, no way Did I want this to happen? It didn't happen because I wanted it to happen. Nobody in their right mind would have wanted this to happen. And then he goes on to make the point that you're right. Nobody in their right mind would have wanted it to happen. It didn't happen because of the mind. He goes on to say it happened because of the soul. That the soul wanted, or we could use the word needed, it to happen. So breathe into that for a moment. Breathe into that for a moment. It can be a tough thing to grasp, can it not? Especially when the change is something that we look at and it's challenging, it's unpleasant, it's scary, we really, really don't like it. And yet, if you look at it, if you remember and recognize that we are more than just this physical body, that we each come into this life experience having garnered experiences elsewhere along the path of life as an eternal soul. And our soul has needs that we're not always in touch with. Our soul draws to it the kinds of circumstances and relationships and situations to help us grow and evolve. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes the very best circumstances and relationships and situations that can help our soul grow and evolve are the ones that our human self finds the most difficult to deal with. But if you think about it, the human part of us tends to like to keep things easy and predictable. The human part of us tends to like to be comfortable and to stay comfortable all of the time. It's one of the reasons that the human self, I see many of you nodding, the human self looks for security. The human self says, let me get everything all in order in a predictable way and keep it that way so I can be comfortable. That is not the same agenda that your soul has. Your soul's agenda is growth. Your soul's agenda, we are an individualized expression of Spirit, of God. We are one with the one. How many of you would say that there's a little bit of a gap between what you express and manifest physically in your life and the divine perfection within you? Is there any gap between those two? Nod your yes. Well, how are we going to close that gap? We begin to close that gap as the soul begins to grow and evolve. And much of the growth and evolvement that happens in those most difficult changes and experiences that the human part of us wants to say, no way. Does this make sense then when Walsh is saying that no, it's not anybody in their right mind necessarily that wanted that difficult, awful circumstance, that change, but there's something in that the soul needs to launch it forward in its growth. When we can hold that understanding, we will find ourselves so much better equipped to handle anything that's going on in our life. Because we will get, as I talked about last Sunday, that there is our agenda and there's the God agenda. And our agenda is a human agenda that wants everything status, not necessarily status quo, but easy and predictable and comfortable and, you do know, right? But the soul is listening to the God agenda, if you will, the spiritual agenda that says, I am here to grow. I am here to learn what love is. I am here to learn what forgiveness is. I am here to learn what selfless service is. That's why I am here. That's why I am here. Walsh expresses in the book that one of the things that can be helpful to us in going deeper into understanding the soul is to ask and answer 4 fundamental questions. I'm going to give you the questions. I'm not going to take the time to go into his answers. You can look for them in the book. But he says we need to understand, who am I? Who am I? We need to understand, where am I? And please understand, he's not talking about a geographic answer to that question. Where am I? Why am I where I am? Why am I where I am? And what am I doing here? Not the kind of what am I doing here that's said out of frustration, but the what am I doing here that's said from the soul level, He goes on to give what I think is a nice amount of reassurance. He says that when you get that no matter what change is happening, your soul is needing it for your growth and your development, for its unfoldment. He says, just because you know that doesn't mean it doesn't sometimes come with a fair measure of fear associated with it. A fair measure of fear associated with it. Many of you are probably aware of that acronym for fear: false evidence appearing real. I think that's a very helpful acronym. False evidence appearing real. The next time you feel yourself afraid of some change, of some situation, of some opportunity, ask yourself to look at that concept. Where is the false evidence appearing real? Where am I being tricked here by the appearance? But I like what Walsh suggests as another acronym for fear. And that is, instead of false evidence appearing real, what if we approached it from this concept? Feeling excited and ready. Feeling excited and ready. That would be entirely different, would it not? For how many of you like roller coasters? I know not everybody likes them. Why do you like them? They are not flat and even. You like them because there's an adrenaline, right? There's an excitement. It is, I know some of you are saying, I don't like roller coasters. Stay with me with the analogy here. There's a certain sense of feeling excited and ready. We can flip, we really can. We can flip the feeling of fear that debilitates us or holds us back when we practice little things like this, when we practice looking at that fear as, okay, false evidence appearing real. Okay, instead of being afraid, the feeling of fear and the feeling of excitement are awfully similar when you come right down to it. I can choose to feel excited and ready. I can choose to get the butterflies in formation and feel excited and ready. So I want you to turn to somebody right now and say, I am feeling excited and ready. Go ahead. Good job. Good job. All righty. So the first tool is the tool of how we look at change, and that we're going to look at change as the soul needs, wants this for its growth and unfoldment. And I said that the second tool that we're going to touch upon is the tool that we can take from the events of Passover week, of Holy Week, and of Palm Sunday. So we have Jesus who is riding into Jerusalem. We call it Palm Sunday. He didn't call it Palm Sunday. We call it Palm Sunday because as he rode into Jerusalem, we're told he rode in on a donkey or on a beast of burden. He rode in. The paths were dirt paths. The symbology of laying palm fronds down was twofold. It was a gesture of honor, but it was also had a practical purpose. And that practical purpose was in laying the palm fronds down, the hoofs of the animal wouldn't throw up dust on the person who was riding the animal. So it was an expression of respect and had some practicality there. He goes into Jerusalem. He knows exactly what is going to befall him in the days to come. He celebrates the Passover, which is where we get the experience of communion in the Christian church. He celebrates the Passover with his disciples, and he's aware of what's about to happen in the next few days, and we could say that perhaps he was afraid, and perhaps he was not in that place of false evidence appearing real or that place of feeling excited and ready, because he wanted to go and pray. And in the Gospels, we're told that he asked some of the disciples to go with him to pray, to watch him, to be with him. And we're told that in the Garden of Gethsemane, part of his initial prayer was basically, let this cup pass from me, meaning if I don't have to go through with this crucifixion, that would be my choice, right? And then there's a moment, and we don't know what was going on in his psyche, but there was a moment where he also completely surrendered and said, but not my will be done, thy will be done. Not my will, but thy will be done. And so he goes into the garden to pray. He knows that he needs that, but he goes, as Scripture says, he says to his disciples, stay here and watch with me. Stay here and watch with me. He went not alone. Think about that for a moment in terms of the toughest places in your life. One of the things that I have observed about us in our teaching, in Unity and in Science of Mind, is that many of us have a tendency, when things are really tough, when we're afraid, when we're discouraged and depressed, when we can't figure out our way through or around, we tend to isolate. And I think that it's the shadow side of our teaching in a way, because our teaching emphasizes so much of the bright side, so much of faith, so much of possibility, that sometimes then it's as if we feel ashamed that we are having the difficulty that we're having, and we don't want anybody to know, so we isolate, we stay to ourselves. That is not a healthy way of dealing with difficulty. It's not a healthy way of dealing with fear. It's not a healthy way of dealing with grief or dealing with upset in your life or significant challenge and change. Isolation is not helpful. Jesus went apart to pray, to connect with his inner self, to connect with Spirit, God, but he had his followers, a small group around him, and all he asked of them was stay here with me and watch. In his core of core, he knew he wanted and needed that. If he wanted and needed that, don't you think it's okay for us to need that? Don't you think it's okay to say, hey, I need some help? Hey, I'm not going to isolate and stay away from my community. I'm going to lean into my community. I'm not going to pretend that everything's all right now when it's not. I'm going to reach out to a prayer partner. I'm going to reach out to a chaplain and say, will you know the truth with me? Will you stay awake to the truth with me? Now, the challenge with Jesus' story wasn't with Jesus, but it was with the guys he had around him. They fell asleep. Not once, but I forget it was 2 or 3 times, I believe. And he didn't like that. What does that say to us? What's the teaching in there? To me, the teaching is the people you take with you when you need that small group around you because you're feeling challenged, you're feeling like you can't find your way through, you don't take the people who are going to fall asleep. You can love the people in your life who fall asleep. You can love the people in your life who have not yet awakened, and I bet we all have some in our life who haven't awakened at all. You love them and you don't judge them, but those are not the ones you take with you. You take with you the 1 or 2 that can stay awake. Nod your head right now if you've got at least 1 person in your life. They do not have to be an enlightened master, but 1 person in your life who is awake. Nod your head. Look around you. How many of you have one of those people here in this community? Okay. Your assignment is to connect with those people on a regular basis, and especially when you're having a Garden of Gethsemane experience. When you're wanting to say, hey, God, I'd really not like to drink from this cup today. Because you still may have to drink from it, but you do not have to go it all by yourself. You'll have to do the inner work by yourself. I can't grow for you, and you cannot grow from me. But I can grow better when you're in my life, awake, helping me to remember the truth. And I can do the same thing for you. It is not enough, I'm going to end here, it is not enough to find a spiritual teaching that makes sense to your mind and heart. That is a really important first step, but it is not. It won't take you where you want to go. You need to have a cadre of people that have a similar spiritual understanding and a desire to practice, and you need to connect with them in community. To me, that is what this place is. It is a teaching place, and it is a place to connect people so that we do not have to do the work all by ourselves. Namaste. Thank you.